Hello and welcome back. I have iced tea. It's Sunday. Let's talk about some birds. This week in our 5th episode, I want to talk about kind of the week that just went past, what I've been seeing out there, how migration's coming along. But more importantly, there's several subjects we can jump into and a few things to look forward to. Which hopefully will excite a few people and maybe get all of us into some collective birding. Collective birding is something I've been arcing towards the last several weeks. I've put together a couple of programs amongst a fairly large group of individuals that I'm friends with, including last weekend. So after I recorded the last video, the next day, on Sunday, I hosted a second program, and that second program was sort of shelter-in-place type birding event. This one tweaked the previous concept or idea a bit and gave a 5-mile radius. So effectively said anywhere within 5 miles of your home was fair game as far as hotspots, birding locations, whatever you could find within that space. So the idea for me was give everybody a chance to get out a little bit, but also at the same time respect the guidelines of staying as close to home as possible. And this ends up being a bit of a precursor for something we're going to talk about in a full segment here in a few minutes, where everybody can hopefully get involved if they decide to, if they want to, and kind of collectively pull species together. So I had about 33 people or so participate this last week in the 5-mile radius event. As a collective event, we pulled in 144 species of birds, including Nolan Meyer in Lyon County finding a Say's phoebe within about 1 mile or 2 miles of his house, which is absolutely astounding. You might remember we talked about a Say's phoebe showing up at 140th Street Marsh in Dakota County just prior to that. So there's been a few Say's phoebes, and it's just fascinating that we had one as part of this program actually found within someone's 5-mile radius. So that's absolutely outstanding, really good stuff. Like I said, 144 species of birds. We had a great time all day long. I birded for a fair amount of it. Eventually I burned out. I didn't have any juice left and ended up on the couch, and several birders were still out there getting the job done, finding more species. I'm just looking at my list on the side here. Yeah, when you give 5-mile radius to people, you find some stuff. And, you know, at a point in time in April when we start to expect certain waterfowl to really kind of thin out a bit, there's still some up in the northwest corners. We had reports of greater white-fronted geese still coming in. A snow goose was found in a flock of Canada geese. All kinds of really fun stuff in that, and something, you know, everybody can kind of sink their teeth into in a different way and kind of decide what they're comfortable with and what's appropriate for them. And we'll hear a little bit more about that as I talk about the challenge program coming up. Additionally, we'll talk a little bit about sound recording. I actually had a question come in on the YouTube episode from Kathleen Nelson asking, you know, if we could cover how to make a good sound recording. I am not going to claim to be an expert in this particular arena. I'm technology savvy, so I have and do make recordings of bird sounds when I need them, and I use them, upload them to Facebook groups or whatever if I need help on making identifications or if I just need to reference it for myself. I usually do that in a fairly basic manner, but there are some steps you can take, and I figured worst case scenario, I did track down a couple of articles from reputable locations that at least give you a start, give you an idea, especially if you're just going to be a smartphone user, and a couple of app level settings or things to look out for that you can do. If there is further interest in it beyond what I do offer today, I could dig a bit deeper into it and get myself up to speed. If there's someone out there that knows this stuff exceedingly well, maybe there's an opportunity for someone to record a segment of some sort and make that available. I know a couple of individuals that do a fairly large amount of audio recording. As I said, it's not really something that I do a lot of, but being technology savvy, I think I can help get some people in that direction if that's something you're interested in doing. Looking through my notes here, I just wanted to reference that I do have an article related to yard birding, especially the first yard program I put together, coming up end of this month, beginning of May. The new issue of Minnesota Birding newsletter will come out. Have an article in that will talk about that first experience and maybe encourage some others to put some similar programs together for themselves with their friends, family, and whomever. So just something to look forward to. If you're interested in seeing some written materials, I definitely recommend you take a look at that newsletter monthly anyway, especially as MOU members. Encourage you to get an MOU membership if not, because there is also a segment. Today I had promised that we would start talking more deeply about the MOU website and what feature sets are available there and how they either complement or parallel what's going on with eBird on it. So that will be kind of the initial creating an account, and we won't necessarily create the account, but I'll show you where to create the account, and then paying dues. And once that's in place, then we'll talk about getting your data in there. This first installment will be getting your eBird data in there if you happen to be an eBirder. In future episodes, we can talk about just the direct data input if that's something you're interested in. I don't usually do any direct data input into MOU at this point because it's all eBird, and then I transfer my data over there, and I'll show you the method and the basics of how that's done. And then a couple of tips and ideas, things to look out for in there, because there's a few oddities, few peculiarities around the two platforms and getting your data kind of mashed up between the two of them. But being able to do that gives you a lot of great opportunities for data tracking, specifically around the MOU website. Just looking through the rest of my notes. Oh, and then we're going to talk about hotspots again in eBird, and specifically this time, it's going to be how to create a hotspot and how to merge your lists into a hotspot if a location that you've been birding has become a hotspot. And then a couple of the bits and pieces around that. We touched on that last time. We talked about a personal location like your yard, and then being able to move that location if you don't want it directly over your home for whatever reason. So that's all about location maintenance. And inside of location maintenance, that's where it's hidden for your opportunity also to suggest a hotspot. So if you've been birding somewhere and you're like, hey, this is a public location, this should be a hotspot, why is it not yet? I can tell you why it's not. It's because nobody's suggested it. And there's no magic, algorithm out there or anything for eBird to have hotspot. It is literally just submissions from users, but it's not in the most obvious location for doing it. So I'll go over that and how that process goes, and we'll even talk about one rare bird. It'll actually be a little bit of a personal thing, but we'll talk about one rare bird just because I thought it was kind of interesting, and it actually dovetails a little bit with day listing a little bit that was talked about last week, in sort of a cheeky manner, but something fun that came out of that just yesterday morning, actually. So without further ado, let's jump into the content. Thanks for coming. All right, rare birds this week. I didn't really want to dig too deeply into rarities, where they've been found, and all the details around that. I did mention, obviously, in the monologue or opening that Nolan Meyer found a Say's Phoebe in Lyon County. I'm not even going to go into that, but I do want to talk about, and I wouldn't call it a rare bird, but it is rare in a sense, and I want to talk about a yellow warbler. Specifically, a yellow warbler I found in my own neighborhood. So yesterday morning, I got up, had a little bit of breakfast, and went for a walk. I've been trying to do it absolutely every single day, and I've been taking my camera with me more and more often. And as I was doing that, just about 20 minutes into my walk, I'm going to go down to the bottom of this list, I had this yellow warbler. A couple of songs came out of him, and was able to get a couple of, hiding shots of this bird as it popped between perches and locations. And at the time I thought to myself, well, this is kind of an early yellow warbler. I wonder if it's my earliest or not. So that led me down a rabbit hole. And it made me think about some day listing, and then you'll see a few other details come out of this. So something I was able to do, and this is kind of like a plug for actually eBirding your data. So I said to myself, have I ever even had one in April before, and is this the earliest one I've ever had? So if we go back to our eBird, we can just go to My eBird, and inside of that, we can go to state and province. So down here in your lists, I clicked on state and province. Now, if you want to get every one of a particular species that you have seen before, no matter what time, you would need to look in the particular state and your lifetime list for that species, because it will chain link you into all of them. So in this case, I want Minnesota and I want life. And you see, I've got 320 species in Minnesota. And if we click on here, and then I'm going to change this to alphabetic instead of taxonomic list. So in this list, I'm just going to zoom on down here a little bit further. And I'm going to find yellow warbler right here, number 312, yellow warbler. So I'm going to click on that. Now, the first thing that comes up appears to just be a species general information page. And what's different, though, is if you look at the kind of top dark bar here under the first set of menus, we can see Minnesota life list. So it's giving me species information page with other individuals' photos and details and stuff, but it's actually sensitive to my sightings. So as I scroll down here into statistics, you can see my line is 535 observations. So 535 times I have reported yellow warbler. If we click on this, and usually I have to click on that twice for some reason, this is now every single one of my yellow warbler sightings ever. So I was curious if I had anything in April. So on my iPad, if I do APR and find, there's only 2 sightings for it. So I can see one on April 30th, 2018 at Afton State Park. And then I can see this one from the 25th in Inwood neighborhood. So this is the earliest I have ever seen yellow warbler in Minnesota. So I didn't think anything else of it. In fact, I actually posted on a Facebook group thread that had gotten kicked off saying, hey, I got my first yellow warbler by 5 days, my earliest ever by 5 days. This is where it kind of got a little interesting, though, and this is where we're talking about day listing and details of that sort. Ezra Hosh made a comment. One of my friends lives up in White Bear area, indicated that actually would be the earliest county record ever. And I was like, what, really? So I thought it'd be useful just to go back to this again. So I'm querying the MOU database. So I'm actually going to start over, though. The MOU webpage, the homepage is here. We're going to talk about this in more detail in a bit in another segment, but I wanted to do this one more time for individuals when you're looking for reported birds. So on this left-hand column menu, we can see review reported birds. It's the 4th one down. So right here, review reported birds. And then we can query the sightings database. So a sub-menu opens off of that. The first option is looking at the database. Now, in this, it looks like Washington and yellow warbler is already selected, so it remembered my data from it. But one thing I want to do is I want to look at April. And as Ezra indicated, this would be the earliest one ever. So I'm going to actually go to the end of the month, or thereabouts, and I'm going to ignore the year, so I'm going to click that. So we're just going April 1 to April 30th, any year in existence for yellow warblers, which I've already selected here, you can see that, and then Washington County. And then I'm going to do go. And yeah, there's very few sightings in April, because this is a neotropical migrant. Neotropical migrants have the tendency to be very consistent on when they show up, because they're coming usually from another continent. They're coming from South and Central America. Now, some birds overwinter or stay in the southern United States, and then some of those birds move north early, and these are these individuals we might run into. So you can actually see here, I previously was tied for the earliest record. So that one other one I told you about, 430, I had no idea was also the earliest county record. Now, Linda Sparling had that first in 2011. You can see a report of Sue Caters from 2016, and now mine in 2018. So this new record, once I do upload it to this database, it's already up on eBird, will actually be the earliest county record for yellow warbler that has ever been reported. So just something cool and interesting I wanted to mention, and all of this kind of stems out of previous discussions around day listing or county listing and some of those ideas and stuff. And this is one of the fun things about day listing. If I'm being completely honest, one of the things I do enjoy is stretching the edges of the boundary. How soon or how early can I actually get an individual species? And when you think about how many counties there are, there's 87, and early records, late records, whatever it might be, birding on the fringes, especially in March and April, can be an extremely fun time to try and look for some of these birds that are just a few days, a week too early, or whatever it might be on them. And I actually want to jump a little bit deeper into, if I go back up to the top of this screen, let's see, where am I going to go? I am going to explore bar charts. So we talked about these bar charts before on here. So we're in the United States. We're going to go down to Minnesota. We're going to do counties in Minnesota. So this is a similar type thing that we're going to do. And then I'm going to go to Washington. Hopefully these don't take too long to pull up. All right, so these are the bar charts. We talked about them before, and we're going to go to yellow warbler. All right, here's yellow warbler, and I'm going to click on the little graph icon, just 2 icons to the right of the name. And we're going to see this resulting page. So this is the page for Washington County in eBird of reported species. And this notch right here, that's those records I was telling you about. That's my eBird record and maybe my other eBird record. I don't recall if Sue does eBird or Linda does eBird, but if they don't, then the only reason this bird and all of eBird for Washington County has a green mark on the last week of April is because of the birding I've been doing. Now, that's not me trying to inflate an ego or anything of that sort. That's just the reality that I'm helping provide data on it. If we look at this frequency map on here, look at the massive spike in this species during that first week of May. So as we get into that last week of April into the first week, we go from almost 0 to all of them. So these birds come through in a very dense grouping, and they do not usually arrive very early to that. If we zoom way in here, you can see 0 on the 15th, and then by the time we get to that last week, then we start to just move off of it. That little crook, that little increase, those are the records we just looked at. The MOU records, the eBird records, the 2 that I've got on this bird. So I can literally see my data is beginning to lift this off of here, and then everyone's data is creating this giant peak in here and showing when these birds are out there. So understanding the fringes, and this data becomes valuable over time because we're talking about data that could go back decades, and it's only in the last 10 years, 6 years, 8 years that we're starting to see some of these birds show up early. Now, I don't know if that's global warming. I don't know what those factors are, but I do know that this data is critical and important. So it's just fascinating. A common bird that we can find just about around any wetland, pond, whatever it might be, with willow trees, some of that space, yellow warblers all over the place. Relatively easy to find. I think I saw 86 different counties out of the 87 with yellow warbler last year. Maybe it was 85, but it was really close to every county. So they're easy to find. And if we're starting to get trends of them showing up a few days earlier, this is where the data is going to show up. And these trend lines may shift. And there may be implications for that shift. We still get some pretty cold weather. So if we start getting some of these birds showing up too early, they're not necessarily going to make it through a cold snap because these guys are insectivores, they're bug eaters, and whatever, from a food standpoint, they're not going to have that available to them. So shift in them, depending on the climate and everything, a lot of different factors in there. I thought it was just a fun item instead of just delving deep into a few rarities across the state, just to talk about that, and kind of ties back to some previous subject matter and bits and pieces we talked about. Okay, welcome back. I am happy to announce the MOU is going to be sponsoring a virtual program that involves all of you that have cameras, all of you that are birders, to take pictures and share those on our digital platforms. So the whole idea of this challenge is for all of us to work together, collectively birdwatch, collectively photograph birds, and put those up on the social media spaces and share in kind of that experience, and basically just have a large event where we can all feel like that we're still a part of something, that we're engaging in birding with others, and then still maintaining social distance and safe habits in it. This is going to run from May 1st until 8 p.m. on May 10th, so about a 10-day event. We wanted to stretch this out long enough to give everybody an opportunity that's it's not a situation of everybody needs to rush to try and get the most, and that's why this isn't a contest. Just the idea is that as opportunity presents itself, we get out, we birdwatch, we take some pictures if we're able to, and then we share this stuff. And a lot of bird photography is take pictures and then find time to download them onto your system, and maybe you want to tweak them or whatever and then put them out on it. And some individuals that may engage in this will be maybe an opportunity to do your best, in the sense of like, I'm really going to work on this photograph of this species and really get something amazing and whatever. But I hope other people just share their pictures, because this doesn't have to be about, I've got the best pictures, the greatest pictures out there. This is just an opportunity for all of us to kind of fill the social media space with pictures of birds and say, this is what I'm finding, this is what I've got, and then we'll do an aggregate. I'll actually be in the background of this event as a member of the social media committee. I'll be doing the aggregate listing work. And then we'll have a couple other members doing stuff in the background as well. Dana Sterner is going to run our Instagram account, and we're going to repost some bird photos and spotlight individuals' efforts through those social media platforms, and just draw attention to what the membership, what individuals such as yourselves are doing out there. And like I said, this is just an opportunity to have fun and to do some things. So this program listing, the flyer, all this is going to be posted up here in the next day or so on the Minnesota Ornithologists Union Facebook page. We'll probably see a few details pop up through Instagram. We'll probably get something through the listserv out there. And all this information, we'll get it posted out. We'll get a reminder out on like Thursday of this coming week, so basically the last day of the month. And then there'll be daily posts go out on the MOU's Facebook page where individuals can share their photographs. And that's where the aggregate work's going to be done in the whole deal. From a rules standpoint, I want to cover this. It's short and to the point, but I don't want it to be confusing. I didn't want to overwrite this. I just wanted this to be a fun event. So as we put this together and kind of workshop the language and everything, I just want to go through this real quick. So we want to respect shelter-in-place guidance from the state. And we're asking birders, photographers to stay within 5 miles of their home or at least within your own community and county. So what does that mean? What it means is we're not interested in restricting you beyond what you've become comfortable with and beyond what you feel is appropriate for your specific area. Now, 5 miles is a large space. And if you're in the city, if you're in the Twin Cities area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, you can go to a lot of places within 5 miles. At the same time, there's a lot more people within that space. So going beyond 5 miles is probably really unnecessary. Now, again, I'm not interested in restricting other people. I'm interested in us enjoying this process and everybody being safe in the meantime. If you live in a county that is really low population and you could drive 30 minutes and only drive by a couple of homes or farmsteads or whatever it might be, or you're only going to drive, around some other community or whatever, if we're not going out and hitting gas stations in someone else's community and using their resources and, introducing more, transmission vectors for, coronavirus or whatever, then you're probably still being safe. So that's why the second part of this, the whole your own community and county, is in there, just because there's an understanding this is a very large state and everyone has a different situation, and we just want everybody to be mindful of that when engaging in this challenge, and do the minimum amount of travel so that you can enjoy this and that you're comfortable with, and continue to utilize the resources within your community and minimize your contact outside of it. So that's enough on that. Couple of different things that we've done in this and wanted this to just be fun is we've introduced a couple of different categories and challenge concepts or whatever. So if you have a camera, and again, it doesn't matter if you have $100 camera or a $6,000 camera. The idea of this is to enjoy yourself and to pick a challenge that you're interested in and run with it. Track that challenge for yourself and then share your progress and share your results on the daily posts that'll be going up on the MOU Facebook page. So the first one is a species count. We created some categories of, okay, if you got 5 to 19 birds photographed, you're kind of a Zen photographer. But maybe you really work on those 5 to 19, or maybe you just pick out 5 birds and say, I'm going to create the coolest photos that I can possibly get with these species. All the way up to the impossible. Is it possible in 10 days for somebody to get 100 photographs, 100 different species photographed? Doesn't matter the quality, nothing, whatever. Just do what you feel is necessary. I think 100 is possible, but we marked it impossible simply because I'd like to get stuck in someone's head out there and actually have somebody come back with 100 species, which would be quite amazing. And then the species family challenges. So there's an addendum or supplemental attachment at the end of this, you'll see. We've grouped all of particular types of birds. So the sparrows, the waterfowl group, raptors, warblers, kinglets, virioles, flycatchers. So we created these groups, and basically just the idea is go for 10 photographs. But go for 10 photographs that represent some major groupings. Now we had to restrict, I didn't want it to be 20, 30, 40 groups or whatever, so we grouped a number of birds and species together, and knowing that we have a very big state, it might be a challenge to find a gull, in the southern half of the state, but it won't be too much of a challenge to get a shorebird or maybe a heron or whatever it might be. So with all of these groupings, try and get a bird in every group, or maybe try and get 2 different species in every group for 20 photos. Whatever it might be, this is a different way to kind of slice it up. Additionally, if you don't have a camera for birding, other than say you've got like your smartphone, but you're not going to get, identifiable pictures of birds, from any distance or whatever, short of them literally just walking up to you, with your smartphone. Now you could get some, and I definitely wouldn't discourage, making the attempt to do so. But if you don't have a major camera of any sort or whatever, just go out and birdwatch and take selfies. Take selfies of you and maybe a family member if you're birding together, and something that identifies where you went and whatever, and share that information. And I can actually share something of my own on here. I'm going to open up my Instagram if I can find it. There it is. 2 years ago, I did a state park big year. So I hiked in every state park and birdwatched in it. And one thing that I did at every park I went to was I took a selfie. This is not normal for me. I don't usually put myself in photographs. I'm more interested in the birds, but this was just a fun thing I did, and then it kind of stuck. So I took a picture of myself with every state park sign as I got to the park. So as I did my North Shore run, that started to be a thing, and you can see I've got tons of other photos in here, but I went to all of these parks and I took pictures of myself with their signs. So that's kind of the encouragement, is take some selfies wherever you go. Here's Old Mill up in the northwest. Franz Jevny, Big Stone Lake. And as I got down and through this was LaSalle Lake recreation area. That was my second to last one. And then I hit the last one was Itasca State Park. 73 different locations on it. So just, that's an example of kind of what I'm talking about in there. What we're looking for is, take pictures of birds, and if that's not an option, take a picture of yourself. Share a picture of yourself out birding and saying, hey, I'm out birding, during coronavirus. I'm being safe and I'm enjoying it, and, that kind of stuff. Another way that you could share photos, if you don't want to use Facebook, you're not in that space, you could always use Instagram. Now, I guess being truthful and honest, Instagram used to be owned somewhere else, but Instagram is owned by Facebook. So I guess if you're using Instagram, you're effectively using Facebook. But Instagram's a nice way to do it, and you can hashtag your photos in there so they're easier to track down. So you actually don't have to post them on an MOU owned resource. If you just tag them with this tag that we've gotten here, MOU 2020 Photo Challenge, then we can do a search and find any posts anyone has made on their accounts using that particular hashtag. There's a little disclaimer at the end here. You retain all of it. You retain your photo rights, the whole bit, but we may repost them on our platforms and stuff, and kind of spotlight them a little bit on there. I do want to go back real quick though, out here. So we'd looked at one of these lists a little earlier. So just, some samples. I wanted to show some pictures that are just real pictures. It's not me trying to do my absolute best and just create these amazing photographs. I have a decent camera, but it is not a high-end camera on it. It is a really good zoom. So here's some hooded mergansers I took a picture of a few days back. Here's a rough look at a sandhill crane on the other side of stuff, all blurry, but it is identifiable. And that's the key for this whole challenge, is if the bird's identifiable, that's all that really matters. Obviously, this is a pretty decent picture of a sapsucker, yellow-bellied sapsucker on it. And I've got a couple of, really decent, really sharp pictures, Eastern Phoebe here on it. But then some that are just kind of run-of-the-mill, little grainy. Nothing amazing, but they are identifiable. Blue jay. And then some of them are, some real challenge pictures. Here's golden crown kinglet I got there at Lake Elmo Park. He's right at the center of this image off the trunk. This is not, an amazing photograph, but it is identifiable. It's enough. So don't worry about, are my pictures good enough to share, whatever. This whole challenge, look at this one. This guy's ruby crown kinglet's face is, half hidden behind some twigs and stuff. Most photographers would just throw this away. It's identifiable. If it's the best one you got, share it. What else we got in here? Just some, ground shots of a chipping sparrow. Again, nothing amazing. It's there's no awards to be won on any of this stuff. I've got some field sparrows in here, a couple of juncos on the ground. Here's a yellow rump warbler that posed for a second, which warblers can be a challenge to get photographs of. So The entire idea of this whole thing is to simply get everybody together May 1st through May 10th. Check out the MOU Facebook page. Keep an eye on that for the official announcement, as well as daily postings where you can put your progress and photographs up. And like I said, I'll be doing an aggregate list to figure out how many photographs or different species we were able to photograph during the event as a group, and just something fun to do, and participate when you can, and follow along on social media, and let's see how many birds we can pick up in the next week or so. All right, so in this next segment, I want to talk about personal locations and hotspots, and specifically want to address how to merge locations. We already talked about how to move a location in a prior episode, and that was in relation to your home location. But there are a couple of other things. There's this merging idea. You can rename a location, but then you can also suggest a hotspot on it. So I'm going to open up eBird here. So I'm on my eBird. So if you just go to ebird.org and select my eBird, you're going to see this. We've seen this before. On that right-hand side, there's a set of menu options below the donate button. So as you go down that list, there is manage my locations. I already have that open. We've been in here before when we're looking for a home location on it. So when we take a look at merging information on it, I can show you what this kind of looks like and how it manifests itself. So I'm going to go to a location that I became aware of this. So you can see Valley View Park here. So Valley View Park is in Oak Park Heights. It's near Stillwater in Washington County, but you can see two entries here. So I'm going to go over to this location. So now that I'm in this location, because I am given this set of options, you can see a blue icon at the top next to Valley View Park, Oak Park Heights, GPS coordinates for it, and then three options: rename, move, and merge. So the interesting thing here is this is my personal location, which means I have lists attached to this location. However, I'm acutely aware now that Oak Park Heights has since become a hotspot. So your personal location does not immediately merge into a hotspot if you have a bunch of sightings there. Now you might subsequently start using the hotspot, but your previous sightings that are sitting under your personal location stay as a personal location unless you take an action. Now, how did it become a hotspot? It became a hotspot because somebody asked for it to be a hotspot, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, and you can see it right on here. Right next to the GPS coordinates, there's suggest as hotspot. But let's focus on this. We want to merge this. So in my case, there is a hotspot at this location, and I want my stuff to show up in that particular location. So I'm actually going to take a real quick look. Let's go to Explore Hotspots. Year-round, all years, and we're going to do Valley View Park. View Park. Yeah, third one here, Washington, Minnesota, Valley View Park. So here's a hotspot. There are 63 species in that particular hotspot. Let's do view details on this. So this location gets special treatment because it is a hotspot. Additionally, when you scroll down here, what you can see is that I have 29 lifetime species on there, and then the other birders that have birded at this particular location. So 29, let's keep that in mind. I don't know if this number is going to change or not, but we will find out. And we can do it by checklist too. Let's do that. By checklist. This says I have one. So I've got one checklist, 29 species, according to this page. All right, let's go back to here though. I'm going to switch this to satellite view just so we can see a little more detail around it. This park actually is just barely north of a correctional facility in Oak Park Heights. Zoom in on this a little bit right here. So if I do merge, so it's on rename, move is an option, and then merge. I'm going to click on merge. What it's going to do is load markers. So you can see a couple of little blue dots showed up. There's one to the north up on the highway, and then there's one over at Brecky Park on the west side of that map. And then there's my green location, but if you look right off the edge of that, hiding there, is the hotspot location. That's what the little flame orange icon is. So if I do a merge, it says merge two checklists with, and then delete after merging. So what I can do is I can take all the checklists I've submitted to this personal location and merge them into the hotspot, the master location. So I'm going to click on that flame icon, and you can see up above, it now says merge two checklists with Valley View Park, delete after merging. My location was Valley View Park, Oak Park Heights. That's just what I named it the first time I ever went there. And I went there before it became a hotspot. Now it's a hotspot. I want all of my data in the hotspot because then the data is easier. It's more aggregated. It's easier to look at, understand, know what your history is for a location. And maybe this is a spot I'll continue to go to over time. And I'd like it to all be in one location, especially from the centrally managed hotspot. So this is all set, and I can click the merge button right up just above the map on the left, merge. Are you sure this can't be undone? The reason why it can't be undone is because it's deleting the old information. It's effectively creating a copy of your checklist and then moving them underneath that location. So I'm going to say yes. All right, so that should be in there. I'm going to click back to this tab that I've got here, and I'm going to refresh this. I don't know if this updates immediately, but I wanted to try it out and see if it's a thing. Aha! Here it is. Top eBirders. Larry, sorry, he was number 1 at 31, and I was at 29, and now I'm at 64. And if I go to checklists, scroll right back to it, you can see that I've done 3 checklists. We merged 2 into the one that I have. Now there's 3 there. Larry's done 4, so he's been there a few times. Go back to the species list here, if it will. All right, so eBirds, oh, there it is. It did refresh on us. So yeah, 64 species. I'd say it qualifies as a hotspot. I'm glad somebody submitted it in. I don't know who, if it was Pete. He's actually the hotspot reviewer for our state. So if you submit a hotspot, that's where it's going to go. But that's how you merge your locations in to another location. You can also do some stuff if you've got a bunch of odd locations and you're trying to get them aggregated because they were just random selections along a road, but they're actually, a part of another. So you can merge personal locations together, and they don't even have to merge to a hotspot. You can just merge locations as long as they're geographically close to one another. You can start merging them in and then reduce the number of locations you have. And we've seen it before. I've got an insane number of locations, and it does, if I go back to manage locations, I've got 3,700 locations, and it kind of it's a lot to manage, but there are some things you can do to go. So here's something I did want to talk about, and that's recommending a hotspot. And it actually just happens to be on screen right now. I don't know how that's even possible at 3,700 locations, but on this, I started in preparation. I was looking at my list. I was like, okay, is there any locations I can recommend as hotspots? Because the program I talked about last week that I did, the 5-mile radius program, I actually did end up recommending 2 new hotspots in Washington County, because one of them used to be an open space from the city of Woodbury that actually transitioned into full park status. So it got a park name officially. And so what I did is I renamed my location, and then I submitted it as a hotspot request, and Pete approved it. So he looked it over and said, yep, that looks like it's at a location that's reasonable. It's a public location. We approve it. It's going to become part of eBird's hotspots on there. Getting back to the whole point about hotspots. How and why do they become a hotspot? They only do that because of us, the users. The individuals at Cornell don't know anything about our locations. So they use regional volunteers like Pete Nichols to vet some of the stuff coming through and, make it become, a usable resource for the public. So in this case, I thought this was kind of humorous. The county park system in Washington County is really pretty decent. And I have no idea how, but Pine Point Regional Park near Stillwater is still not a hotspot. And I'm not really certain why. You can actually see it on my screen right now. I have 17 different lists at this location. So I am going to edit this. I have 17 lists here. I actually looked to see if I needed to merge my stuff into another location, and there wasn't a location, nothing to merge it into. So if I do a merge here, or attempt a merge, it's going to churn looking for markers, and it's not going to find any. So, and I don't know how long this thing's going to run. I'm just going to go back to rename so that it's not sitting there. Or maybe it's going to churn anyway. But right below Pine Point Regional Park, that is the name of the park. That's what I want it to be called, so I don't need to do a rename on it. I think that's appropriate. That's something anybody should be able to see. And if we look in on the GPS here, or the satellite, it's a pretty decent park. It's not absolutely massive, but it does have a trail coming through it. A paved trail runs through it. A lot of bikers come through there. Really nice space. It's got trails, hiking trails, all kinds of good stuff. So suggest as hotspot. So I'm going to click that little link. Are you sure? The request will be sent to a local volunteer hotspot reviewer. So only do this if it's a public location. It's a location that you believe should be a hotspot, and hotspot, it's a place where there should be a lot of birds or is regularly birded. I don't know. You use your discretion, and worst case scenario, if the request goes into Pete, he might look at it and say, yeah, that's not appropriate for a hotspot. Here's why, whatever it might be on it. So I'm just going to click yes. Let's see if this will go. All right, eBird is moving slowly today for some reason. All right, there we go. It has been submitted. Just brought me back to this view. So that is a new hotspot request. With any luck, in the next few days or week, depending on when Pete is able to get to it and vet it. He knows about this location just because of the fact that we're in the same county. But it might take a little bit of research and just validate that the hotspot location is appropriately set, so that it's not like set on private property, whatever it might be. It's maybe the best location is the main parking lot, depending on how big it is. Whatever those details and stuff are, it'll be vetted out. So just, something to look at, managing your locations, being able to merge them if you need to, recommend a hotspot, all of that kind of stuff, rename them. We talked about moving them. All that stuff in there can be managed inside the app. Inside the website, they can't really be managed from the app. So if you're doing this from your phone, you're eBirding from your phone, you might have to go to the actual website from a computer and use these feature sets to mess around with them a bit and get some submissions in for them. But that's all I wanted to cover on that subject. Hopefully that helps a few people, and maybe you've got some ideas on places you'd like to recommend as well. All right, we are back, and I want to briefly go over sound recording. So the idea of getting some kind of a recording of a bird song or bird call, whether it's for identification or upload to eBird, whatever it might be, it is another type of media. Now, as I referred to in the opening, this was a question or comment from Kathleen Nelson. Really appreciate that, and there's some interest out there, I'm sure, from other parties that want to go down this path. Now, there's a couple of different ways for us to get there, and I think the first one I'm going to take is, I don't want to throw a ton of information at you because sometimes things can be technology laden simply because when I talk about them, there's a lot of tech I'm aware of that's available. What we don't want to do is we don't want to go overboard, and we don't want to talk about, well, you can go get this device, you can get, a parabolic mic, or you can get, this boom with a windscreen, and you can get this device and whatever else. There is a whole path that you can travel from a bird watching standpoint to be a sound recording person and to really get into it. You can get to the nth degree just like anything else. But most of us have smartphones, and so let's start there. There are apps natively on your smartphones that will record sound. The number one thing to not do is use the voice memo app. So any app, whatever your platform is, that is designed for you to take an audible message to yourself, do not use it for bird calls. Those are strictly designed for the human voice and to limit storage capacity. They will cut out the top and bottom ends of that sound. So anything that you do in a voice app, because it seems, oh, this is easy, I'll just use the voice memo app or whatever it might be. If you use that to record sound, it's not going to work very well. This recording here isn't using special equipment. It's using my iPad, but it's using the camera or video app, and there's also, this is the microphone app tied into screen recording right now. So all the different stuff that I'm doing in recording is recording just from a native microphone built into the device. Effectively, that's what we'd be talking about from a smartphone. As you've got your smartphone in hand, you would open up an app, and then you would start recording. I do a couple of things in there, but these are better explained and better described by a couple of articles I did find out there on it. Audubon.org has an item on this, and All About Birds, which is another Cornell website, has an article as well. I will link both of them in the description. You can see this one here. That's the address for that, A Beginner's Guide Recording Bird Vocalization, so you could Google search that pretty easily. But inside of here, it's just a basic article. It's not super long. You can kind of get a couple of the ideas, and they do talk about gear. And one of the things that I find nice about this is they do say, don't go overboard right away. You want to find an app that will record in WAV files, .wav. And that's just because it's one of the most well-recognized storage efficient formats out there for encoding audio. And then it talks about RecForge 2 on Android platform. So I have a Samsung phone, it's running on Android. RecForge 2 is a free app. So they'll talk about some of that stuff. They'll talk about a mid-range setup, and they'll talk about a premium package. So if you want to go overboard, this article does talk about how to go overboard and go about parabolics and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. This appeals to me. I'm not going to lie to you. This appeals to me, but I can't go down that road right now. In life, I have enough birding equipment. I don't need more on it. So this will talk about some of the bits and pieces around it. It's not a super long article, but it's a decent introduction to it and can probably do a much better job than I can, but at least wanted to get this in front of people. Here's the other article. This is on All About Birds, how to record bird songs with your smartphone. So our tips. So this is doing some of that. It talks about MP3 and WAV files. We see RecForge 2 again in here, and you see that, I don't know how to pronounce that, Rode app or whatever that in there is, and it talks about setting some of the configuration states and stuff, and there'll be this whole discussion about level setting, the peaks and decibels on it. So that's what I was referencing with those voice apps, and every one of these articles says the same things, is do not use one of those native voice recording apps because they're not designed to handle bird song, and you're going to cut off top and bottom, and you might sound like you're recording it, and then once it gets uploaded somewhere, it's not really getting the job done on it. So this one's another good read. I recommend reading both of them. There's some videos available here in the shotgun mic and parabolics and stuff if you really want to see what that stuff's all about. But this is based on using your phone. You can see the gentleman here in this photograph just is holding his phone out there. He's kicked off the app and he's recording it. This does work. I used it once a few years ago when I heard a weird vocalization in a swamp. I got as quiet as I could, held my phone up, even cupped my hands around the back of the phone so I could maybe collect a little bit more sound, and used that to get help in identifying an odd vocalization for a least bittern that I had never heard before. So it definitely does work. I just want to leave you with these two articles. And again, I'll list them in the description and hope that at least helps start taking that first step down the road. And then in the future, if I find an opportunity, I can dig in a little bit deeper to some of this stuff and maybe actually show an app and configuring it in there. But I would have to do a review. I haven't had a chance to really dig into some of those apps because, like I said, I haven't done a ton of this myself. But it was worth mentioning. I really appreciate Kathleen reaching out, making that comment, because there is some good value in getting sound recordings, even if it's just for yourself. If you can get a look at a bird, recording of that bird, and then start doing some playback and comparison with apps and stuff to really get to know the sounds that a bird makes on there. So that's good. All right. So in this last segment, I want to go through the process of just getting set up in the MOU and paying dues and starting to use that as a data storage location for bird sightings. First, though, I want to say that if somebody were to ask me and say, where should I put my data? My response is, and I say this as a member of multiple MOU efforts, programs, committees, start with eBird. The reason why I say that is because the eBird data is more granular. The eBird data historically requires a set of GPS coordinates for where exactly you were located when you found particular birds. Additionally, the MOU data is county level based. It doesn't require that granular data, granular information. Now, I'm not making any judgments one way or the other in that space, but what I am saying is you can always go less granular with data. You can't go more granular if you don't have that information. So eBird creates greater granularity. It has a broader audience, and I believe from a scientific standpoint that is more appropriate. Now, to assuage any concerns around that, both of these two data sets share information with one another. So if you only use eBird, the MOU will get it. That's why I am comfortable saying this the way that I am saying it. The same is also true the opposite direction. eBird benefits from MOU data. So if you're an MOU user and that's all you want to do, the eBird data set will benefit anyway. But I think we should prefer eBird and then use the MOU, and you can load your data in MOU manually as well, and that's something we're going to get into here today. On that is utilizing both platforms, because you've seen me time and again refer to one, refer to the other, refer to them both. They are different, distinct in many ways, but they overlap on it. So let's jump into that. If you come into the MOU webpage, not logged in, not having an account, this is what you see. In the upper left corner, it just says login. You can get to a lot of the information that's available here, but there are information pieces that you can't. All right. So in Contact the MOU, you have the option to join by mail and join by PayPal. So those two options are in there, and I highly recommend you do so. The MOU has a lot of different programs going on, and I have seen them do a lot of really good things. So no matter what's going on out in the world, I have seen the MOU being a positive influence as an organization on bird watching and our communities. So getting your membership up to date, and then you'll need an account. So you need to have your dues paid and you need to have an account. Creating an account you can do roughly at the same time, and that's up in the upper left corner, the login. So if I click on the login, there's an option to do register. You fill this information out, has a user ID, your name, and a password, email address. That stuff gets filled in. And then if I just pop over to here, I have my account and I'm going to log in. So now we're logged in and our dues are paid. And now what? How do I get data in here? So the first way, and the only way I'm going to talk about it today, is to pull in data from eBird. Because that's where my data is at. We can talk about other things as far as just direct data entry. I know some people that do direct data entry, even though they have an eBird record. It's just all your personal preference. So let's go back to, let's see, eBird. Yeah, all right. So here we are in the eBird website. If you go into My eBird, so I'm already logged in here, I've got my account, go to My eBird. There is an option in this right-hand side. We've talked about the Donate Now button. Go down the list. Towards the bottom, we have Download My Data. So this isn't a direct process. You have the ability to get your data set. This is one of the other nice things about eBird is your data, even though it's contributing to the whole, you can get your data when you want. You click Submit here, you will get an email from eBird with a zip file. A zip file is nothing more than a compressed version of your data file. So it's just easier to transport because these files can get fairly large depending on how much you've birded. I've been going 7 or 8 years now, maybe more, and a lot of entries, so my data file can get fairly large, so they compress it. When you get it in email, you then download it. So website. And when you're back on the MOU's website, you do the third option down, reporting birds. So again, I've paid my dues, I've got an account, now I'm ready to upload data. I go to this third option, reporting birds, and there are a lot of different input methodologies. I don't know most of these, I don't use most of these, but the eBird one I do, and that's the fourth option down, eBird input to database. From this point, it is relatively simple. eBird has a common format. There's even instructions on here on what to do, so you could follow those, and it talks about the zip file. So you can see that fourth down, save this file to your computer, there is a zip file. This says optional, unzip this file and save the included file to your machine. Includes a CSV file or zip with the heading. So it looks like you can actually upload the zip file directly. So that's really good information to have. I've never paid attention to it before, but you might be able to just say, eBird, give me my data, get your email, download your zip file, and then come directly to this page on it. So that's a much simpler path. So then you can do a choose file. You go find the file on your computer, select it, it will show up in this line, and then you just hit the submit button. From that point, I've mentioned him before, Dave Callender has a system built into this website that will analyze those records along with your logon information of what's already in there, and it will bring in what's new. And if it's old, if it's already been uploaded before, it will just ignore it and say, nope, not processing that one, not bringing that one in, whatever it might be. Now, it's important to note that there certainly are or can be errors that come through this. There is some data the MOU doesn't want or it doesn't do anything with. There are some subspecies or oddities or domestic species that you can eBird that the MOU will not include in its database, so it just rules those out. Additionally, if you did any eBirding in another state, that data will be thrown out because the MOU is the Minnesota Ornithologist Union. So all of that is done automatically for you, and it is imported into the MOU database. So once it's done, it will tell you it's done. If you're doing this for the first time and you have years worth of data, this import process will take a while. If you do it somewhat regularly, it may still take a while because it is still going to go through the entire file. That's why I started by telling you about extracting the CSV file from the zip file and then potentially using something like Excel to do some further work on it. That's a whole nother video. There's a lot more details and stuff in there, but if this is something you want to get your feet wet with, this is how you would do it. Is to go through that process. The only other thing I would want to reference at this point relating to this concept or idea is this all shows up then in these other options and stuff. So if I go to checklist, it's what, 6 down on the left. So I'll click on checklist. These options towards the middle and bottom here, personal, county, personal, month, personal, nesting. That's where this data is being drawn from, is the data you've uploaded to it. So we've seen personal month before. If I click on personal county checklist, this is effectively a map of the state and how many species you have in each county in that. So this is a county lister's kind of homepage, so to speak. This is kind of a central location, so you can see my data in here. But a cool feature on this is you can go a step backwards in time. In 2018, I've talked about a state park big year, and in 2019, I talked about a statewide county tick big year that I did and got 10,000 county ticks. So if I step back to the beginning of 2018, you can see what my data looked like then. And this map down here of the state changed dramatically. So you can see the key for it. Anything with a dot is only 1 to 49 species, and then we have various shades of green into red, orange, and yellow. And then anything blank, I had nothing in. So back in 2018, and just a couple of years ago, I had very little in this. And you can see my list is a very shallow list of counties. A lot of stuff in Washington and Dakota and Hennepin, but beyond that, not a lot else going on. But if we get to the end of 2018, so we go to the beginning of 2019, that after my state park big year extended me out into other parts of the state. So I really like looking at this data. You can really see your own progress over time, understand where you've been, where you haven't been. This might guide some travel opportunities once we get out of this, kind of virus lockdown that we're all in on it. But this is a really fun place to go to kind of get a good visual look at your spaces. And you can see as I started turning some of these colors, there's still like 2, 4, 6, 7 counties that I hadn't been to by the end of that. But then that next effort, so we go into the beginning of this year, so that's the entirety of last year. That was one of my things, was coloring in the entire state finally. And in some places I went from 0 species to over 100 because I went over 100 in all 87 counties last year on it. So that was, part of the fun of all of this stuff is seeing how the data shakes out. And I think the MOU does a superior job in this space in here. Now, it doesn't mean this data is not available. If I go back to eBird, out on the My eBird, there is a Your Profile. So this is the what's visible to others. If you click on Your Profile, you can see a very similar heat map. Now, it's only tones and shades of, yellow up to darker red or whatever, and it gets to be a fairly homogeneous map, certainly, and if you have a fairly equal number across. But there's not a lot of difference between, say, those metro counties where I have the most and some of these far out counties where I have just over 100 on them. But it's something similar. It's there. The thing that's lacking here is you can't see that progress over time that you can from the MOU side. So that's why when I look at the MOU data and stuff, I really like how it looks, and that's why I use both data sets on it. So hopefully you can use some of this information to your advantage. You can decide for yourself whether or not you want to use eBird and MOU or just one platform or the other. Again, I recommend eBird at a minimum because the MOU will still benefit from the data. But if you want some of these more granular tracking mechanisms, that's where the MOU accelerates a bit because the MOU is focused only on Minnesota, whereas eBird is focused on the entire world for that data. And everything. So that's all I've got to cover this week. If there are additional interests in continuing to dig down these levels on the MOU, I will certainly do that. There is no shortage of information to investigate inside these sub-options. Specifically, the listing segment and section is a lot of fun to dig into. You can get lost for a day in there alone. But this should be a good, at least, review of what's available to you in that space. And till next week, happy birding.